So when we're working with a symmetrical character like this, what we need to do is we need to mirror him over, and then we need to offset the UVs. So the process of mirroring is as simple as coming back up here to mesh, using our mirror, and then going in X in the opposite direction here. So right now it's currently X plus. I think this would need to be X minus, and we can hit apply. And adjust your mesh merge threshold to 0.001. That way it is set. And just make sure no weird rogue vertices are coming down the middle. Usually I press 3 to do this, and in older versions of Maya this was sometimes a problem, but it looks like in this version it's working out okay. We can then repeat this process across the torso. So if I go ahead and take this and we go ahead and mirror, once again you can come up here to your mesh mirror here and set this to 0.001. You can press 3, go into vertex, and just make sure there's no weird rogue vertices. Also check this area down here. This was very tight and close together, so it's good if those areas are double checked, just in case they have any problems. Then we can repeat the process with the legs here. We can go ahead and do a mesh mirror. We can go these across, 0.001, that way they're in the same spot. And then we can repeat the process with the shoulder and the kneecaps. And now our character will be mirrored, and we'll have his own little sheet here. Now, one thing I didn't consider is the weapon. This character's weapon's currently separate, and we'd have to decide if that's the case. If your character was going to swap weapons, you would have it be separate, so we are going to have to go and do the UVs for that as well. But let's focus on the character for now, and then we'll get the weapons UVs in place. So once we're all mirrored, I'm going to delete the history on this, and I'm actually going to change my type over here to show the overlap, which is this one here. You can turn off the checkers if you don't like it. Now, what we want to do is we essentially want to take the red chunks here, and we want to offset them into another UV square. What that does is it allows them to overlap and repeat just like a tileable texture, so we'll get the same texture on the other side. But when we do the baking process in something like Substance Painter for the normal map or the ambient occlusion, it won't double right to this. So what do I mean by that? When you have them overlapping, the computer doesn't necessarily know, and it takes the information and it multiplies it onto the other side. So what we'll want to do is just come in here to UV shell mode, and we can just highlight this entire chunk in a UV shell on the helmet here, come to the transform menu over here in our UV editor, and then in this value here, we want to set it to 1. So this is our offset here. We're going to set that to 1, and then we'll click the next arrow over to move it to the next square. So I'll go ahead and do this for the helmet first. We'll just set this to 1 here, and then offset, and that will offset those so they're on the other side. We can then repeat this process with something like the torso here. I'll go ahead and isolate it. I'll go into UV shell, just select half here. And I do UV shell because it's going to grab pretty much the whole thing. Just be careful you don't accidentally nick the other side, otherwise you'll be grabbing the other side. And you'll notice this little area I didn't quite get. I missed that my selection. You'll be able to tell because we know which side's red, which side's blue. Right. Now, if you're not familiar, the red side is showing us the inverted ones, the ones facing the wrong way. And that's not a problem here since we want that. I'm just going to proceed to do this with the pants, same deal. And then when it comes to the kneecaps, just select that again in shell or face mode and do the same thing here with the shoulder. So now what we should see when I highlight my whole character is on one side we have red, on the other side we have blue. And we can go ahead and delete the history on this guy and call that good, and hit save. And now what we can do is we can quickly do the weapon UVs, since we've kind of ignored those. But those are going to get the character's UV setup, which is the more complex character, the more complex object, I guess you could say. And with the weapons, we can go ahead and repeat this process. It's pretty much the same, just slightly different. So let's dive in and take a look at that. Real quick here, we can manage our layout again here. I'm just going to switch back to general. I'm going to group these, and we'll just go ahead and make this our hero low poly. I'm going to slap this on a layer. We'll just go ahead and make this hero underscore low. Save. And then we can take our axe low here, and we can lay out UVs on this. So I'll go ahead and delete the history here. Looks like we still have our history, which isn't great. We can double check the axe high here just to make sure it matches up okay. We might need to make some adjustments. So for example, if I take a look at this from this view and we turn on the wireframe, you can see how these edges kind of stick out maybe a little bit too far. And since this is symmetrical, I could just set this to world X here. I might just nudge this over and down a little bit so it matches a little bit more closely. And I'll just want to check any areas like that that are super off, like here. Maybe just pulling that up slightly would be nice. Some of the areas, it's okay if it's outside. We generally want to have it be more outside than inside due to how baking works. But we do want to make sure these corners are somewhat close here, so we're getting the right result. That should be good. I don't think anything else really needs adjusting. These are 90-degree edges, so we are going to talk about that in the process here. Let me turn off the axe high, and let's switch over to your UV space and get the UVs done for this one real quick. This one here is kind of interesting because we have to decide where we want the symmetry line to be on the front or the back, since it's symmetrical both front and back. Generally speaking, I probably want it to be on the line going down the middle. But now I'm thinking about it, something that's kind of unique about this is since we're going to put it on its own UV square, maybe we don't mirror it at all. You know, if each weapon's going to be its own UV layout, it might be fine to not worry about mirroring. So let's take a look at that. Let me go to Windows. We'll go into our UV layout. And I'll start the same way I did the last one. I'll just go ahead and create a camera based, and we're going to cut the normal lines we would. So these are going to be the lines that are going to separate the chunks. So we basically want the staff separated from the metals. We can go ahead and click cut on those. If I go ahead and double click these and move them over, these will be their own little segments. And from here, these are just basic polygon shapes, a lot of these. So for example, a cylinder, you're going to cut off the top area, like so, and then you're going to cut a line down the middle somewhere. So you don't really want this to be on the front. I'll just pick a side here, go into the edge mode, and continue that down the side. So I've chosen this side. We can hit cut. And if I go ahead and grab these now, we can do a modify unfold on these, and you can see we're going to get a nice result. Now, if we're doing this symmetrically, I can actually turn off symmetry, asymmetrically, and we can actually move and sew these cylinders back into a single piece. So that way we don't need to worry about so many shells. And this is going to give us a more unique look to our axe, which is kind of nice. Now, coming down here, one of the big things that changes is if we're going to deal with 90-degree edges like we have here, I do need to come into these edges and I need to cut them because those are going to be 90-degree edges and they have to stay cut. And then I'll come along here and cut this. With those bottom ones, because these are going to be small enough, I'm probably just going to unfold this and leave these as is, as circles, without worrying about trying to straighten them out. However, on the bottom here, we do not need this extra line at all. So we could do edit mesh, delete edge and vertex to clear that out. And we haven't really cleaned up our low poly yet, so there will be some things like that. So that's going to get us the, the main part of the axe, the handle. What we can do now is cut apart this part of the axe, and we're going to treat it very much the same way. We're going to have sort of a top and bottom ring here. So I'm going to start with the bottom here and just kind of cutting this out to these sides. So we'll go ahead and hit cut. That way we get rid of that base. And then we can come to the top here. We could do the same thing. And you can think of these as the top of a cylinder, right? We're just going around the outside. So we could go ahead and cut that. Now, if we go ahead and lay this out, doing a modify unfold, you'll see that we end up with this really ugly setup here. And that's because our axe blades are still connected. To separate the axe blades, all we need to do is cut down this line here that's connecting them, the blade line. And I'll do that in the UV view because it's a little bit easier. We'll just go ahead and cut that and then proceed to unfold. And at this point, our UVs are done for our axe, which is kind of cool. Because we're giving this axe its own space, like I mentioned, I'm not going to bother mirroring these because this will allow us to have a unique front and unique back, which, will be nice in terms of grunge, in case you ever see that. We can find a nice angle for some of these, just to make sure that they aren't weird in terms of their angle. And for our straights here, you can get them relatively close to straight and then just do a modify straight in UVs to kind of finish them the rest of the way, which can be nice, like so. And then once we're good, we can just run our layout here, and we could perform this with the same settings we had, and that'll give us a nice layout to our axe. Now, we can think about other ways we could potentially min-max this space. So, for example, if I take a look at this, could this potentially fit in here somehow? Not really. This circle, though, doesn't need to be near the end. And then as far as these goes, I don't think there's a way we can interlink those. So this is pretty optimal. We could probably do more. I'm going to leave it at that. But let's go ahead and keep this as our axe UVs for now to move forward. And we'll just keep the axe and the character kind of separate in terms of their texture maps and maybe even some of their materials. And then we can look at how to work them in tandem in Substance Painter. So it'll be kind of nice. So the next thing I want to do is kind of a test bake in Maya to check and make sure that these are going to work. It's kind of a garbage bake just to make sure there's no issues with the UVs, but this layout should do for our axe and our character now and should set us up to create our textures. Make sure you save before moving on to the next thing, especially after doing all this work. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.